AFR Talk. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. 888-589-8840, the number to call. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. And love to have you weigh in. Let's take calls in this segment, 888-589-8840. Let's take calls this segment over what we've been talking about over the course of the last half hour, the evangelical vote in this election and the impact on the election. I'd like to get your take on that. Do you sense that evangelicals, what do you sense about evangelical turnout? You likely are an evangelical. I think most of the people listening to this program would classify themselves as evangelicals. How did you process things? Were you inclined to stay home? Did you go to the polls even though you were inclined to stay home? What sense did you pick up from your evangelical friends, especially as compared to 2008? Now, Tim Wildman, president of AFA, his points are good. His point's well taken. What I was doing is calibrating this kind of nationwide across all 50 states as if evangelicals are distributed evenly throughout all 50 states, and of course they are not. And Tim's point is you got red states where you have the strongest evangelical presence. They went red. They went for Governor Romney. And blue states where maybe you don't have enough evangelicals, even if they all turned out. I mean, that's his point, and it's a good one. If you have a blue state, even if all the evangelicals in that state turned out, it probably would not, in most cases, have been enough to make a difference. So you got to factor that in, that the evangelical vote is not spread out evenly throughout the entire country. But this piece by Sean Trendy is more generally about white voters, and he talks about the fact that perhaps Governor Romney's Mormonism kept some of the white voters away from the polls. But what Sean Trendy points out, back in 2008, the electorate was 75% white. This year it was 72% white. So the African-American vote was up this year, actually, from 2008, from 12.2% to 13%. The Latino vote was up to 10% this year, from 8.4% in 2008. So you have greater electoral participation in the Hispanic community and in the black community, and a plunging participation rate from white evangelicals. And he says this, talking about the turnout, Sean Trendy, a pretty smart fella. Most importantly, the 2012 elections actually weren't about a demographic explosion with non-white voters. Instead, they were about a large group of white voters not showing up. He says Romney is still running about 2.5 million votes behind John McCain. And now Romney may catch up to that, but his point is Romney is getting fewer votes this year than John McCain got in 2008. Now, it may not stay that way with other votes that are tabulated, but right now he's running behind McCain in 2008. And you remember how tepid the electorate was about McCain. But Obama is running 9 million votes behind 2008. So here's the deal. Here is the deal. Barack Obama is getting 9 million votes fewer than he got in 2008. This should have been a cakewalk. Should have been a cakewalk. He's getting 9 million fewer votes than he got in 2008, but Romney was not able to generate the kind of turnout even that John McCain got in 2008. So what Trendy estimates is that whereas in 2008 there were 98.6 million white voters, this year there were only 91.6. That's a drop-off of 7 million voters, 7 million fewer white voters this year than last year. And he says some of it could have been Romney's Mormonism, but he says it doesn't always fit because you got some southern states where white voter turnout was in decline, which have high evangelical populations. And he looked at Ohio, for instance, and he said in the southeast, which is not one of the urban centers, unemployment was high there in southeast Ohio, and turnout was low among white voters. He says this, my sense is these voters are unhappy with Obama, but his negative ad campaign relentlessly emphasizing Romney's wealth and tenure at Bain Capital may have turned them off to the Republican nominee as well. The Romney campaign exacerbated this through the challenger's failure to articulate a clear positive agenda to address these voters' fears and self-inflicted wounds like the 47% gaffe. Given a choice between two unpalatable options, these voters simply stayed home. And Trendy's point, a lot of these voters in Southeast Ohio that stayed home were white evangelicals. Just Romney gave them no reason to turn out. So Trendy's explanation is that there was just a tepid response from the white voters in general, maybe specifically white evangelical voters. They just didn't turn out. 7 million fewer white voters in 2012 than in 2008, and that is the reason. You know, with a vote differential of 2.5 million, you got 7 million voters staying home that voted in 2008. That's huge. That tips the scales toward Obama. So if those 7 million white voters, this is the point, if the 7 million white voters that voted in 2008 had shown up this year, then Governor Romney would have won. So it'd be more accurate, according to Sean Trendy, to say that it was the absent white voters. It wasn't white voters that put Obama in the White House. It was white non-voters, whites that just didn't bother to show up. And some of that's got to be laid off on the GOP and Governor Romney. He just gave them no reason to get excited about turning out and voting for him. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Anthony, Richmond, Virginia. Anthony, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What do you think?
Good afternoon. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I was just appalled that the Christians just didn't go out and take a stand for righteousness. Here we have somebody in the White House who claims to be a believer, but he wants to save the whales and kill the babies. You know, he wants to have gay marriages. If he says he's a Christian, why isn't he standing on the biblical principles? You know, today what I did is I Googled to see what laws he had passed that would benefit, you know, the community at whole. And I see all these lesbian laws that pass, don't ask, don't tell. I'm like, well, he hasn't done anything. The only thing he's done is brought us closer to socialism. And God forbid that it does get here, but you just look at New York and Jersey looks right now. That's what socialism is going to look at, how things are going to be rationed out. I just couldn't believe that the stand for righteousness, regardless of Romney being a Mormon or not, what he stood for the moral values that we stand on as being believers in Christ, more so than if somebody said that they are a believer. And you guys have a blessed day.
All right. Thank you, Anthony, very much. I appreciate that very much. You know, and Anthony's saying, look, you got to vote your values, your biblical values. It's interesting. The minority turnout, President Obama won 93% of blacks, 73% of Asians, and how much of the Latino vote did he win? Where is that figure? 71% of the Hispanic vote went to Obama and 93% of the black vote. So basically minorities carrying Barack Obama back to the White House. Let's go to Thomas in Ivanhoe, North Carolina. Thomas, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Brian. It's good to talk to you.
Good to have you on.
Well, I'll keep it real brief. When me and my wife, when me and my wife went to bed Tuesday night,
yes, sir,
I felt like I was in a deep dark hole because of what I was seeing. Now, I know some people say, well, we got to educate people, and we got to get them on the issues, and we got to do this, and we got to teach them this and all kinds of stuff so they'll be aware of the issues and stuff. But the truth about it is, Brian, I believe this. People, the things they love and they care about, they will research them. They will take part in them. They will know them. If a person likes fishing, if a person likes hunting or football, he'll know the stats and everything about it. And this was, in my opinion, the most important election in the history of this country. And as much as I hate to say it, I believe Christians have become lethargic and lazy and complacent. And we're fat and lazy as Christians. And if we don't get up off of our rear ends, our spiritual rear ends, and do something, our country is lost. And this country was founded on godliness and principles.
All right, Thomas, listen, I appreciate that very much. We look at the totals we just talked about. It's going to be even more important for evangelicals to turn out because populations that don't share evangelical values are growing. Immigrant populations that aren't evangelicals don't share godly values. They are growing. They're becoming a bigger and bigger percentage of the population. They're going to vote. They're going to be loaded up in buses and vans and taken to the polls. And if evangelicals don't increase turnout, it dropped this year. If evangelicals don't increase turnout, then the vote by default is going to go to those that don't share our values. Let's go to Tammy, Columbus, Ohio. Tammy, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Good day, Mr. Fisher. I was saying just the same thing that you were. All the evangelicals that I know here in Columbus, Ohio, turned out for the vote.
They did.
And the people who voted, the white evangelicals who voted for Obama 3 or 4 years ago, just stayed home. They didn't vote, and I thank them all. But what no one is talking about, I'm reading, on my conservative website and Fox News that it's the GOP's fault. We're done as a party. We've got to rethink our strategies, on and on and on. Now I'm listening to the Christian radio, and they're blaming it on the evangelicals. And what no one is bringing to light is Ohio is a voter ID, has voter ID law. But that ID says it can be a utility bill, it can be a paycheck stub. There is nothing to differentiate between a citizen or a non-citizen. So right here in Ohio, the illegals are voting. We had an early polling place on Morse Road on the north end of Columbus, and the Somalians were coming in by the bus loads. They couldn't read English, speak English, or write English.
Well, it's interesting.
The non-citizens are voting.
Yeah. Well, and I read a story about that, Tammy. I didn't talk about it. It was part of I had a stack of voter fraud stories, and I think it talked about Ohio, the fact that there is never a point in the process where you have to present any kind of photo ID, not to register, not to vote. You just got to show up. You can show them a utility bill. You can show them a union card, and that's all you need to be able to vote. You never have to verify even that you have the legal right to be in the United States. And
correct. And the UN monitors were surprised because in other states you didn't have to show anything.
Yeah, they can't believe it that we're so lax. All right, Tammy, Columbus, Ohio, thank you very much. So Tammy had another wrinkle to it that maybe Ohio was tipped into the Obama column by people that don't even have a right to live in the United States of America. Vote differential in Ohio was only about 100,000 votes. Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be right back after the news. Stay with us.
American Family Radio.